So this time we will talk about web application frameworks. Since this is a web development course, I can't see us going through the course without discussing web application frameworks, because frameworks make our work easy and make our life easy. So let's talk about frameworks, web application frameworks. What is a web application framework? Well, a software framework is designed to support the development of dynamic websites, web applications, web services, and web resources. The aim here is to alleviate the overhead associated with common activities performed in the web development field. Many frameworks these days provide libraries for databases, for database access, for templating, and for session management. They also promote code reuse. Often, multiple libraries for web development are gathered into a single cohesive software stack for web developers to use. So the main goal here, or the main thing about web application framework, is just about making your life easy. That task that you were supposed to take weeks and months to do manually, it's all put together and automated in some respect to make your life a lot more easy. Examples of web application frameworks, say PHP by itself is a web application framework, but you have Symfony, you have CodeIgniter, you have Zen framework. These are just 3 examples of PHP web development frameworks. So you can develop a PHP web application using the Symfony framework, or using CodeIgniter, or using Zen. What's the difference between them and PHP? Well, instead of things that you're supposed to write 10 or 20 lines of code for in pure PHP, if you are using Symfony or CodeIgniter or Zen framework, you might only need 2 lines of code or 3 lines of code. So they make your life easy to accomplish certain tasks. Like user management, for example, if you want to do that in pure PHP, it might take you a couple of lines of code to write. Most of these frameworks already have some libraries and inside that will make it easy, and functions that would make it easy to just write 1 or 2 lines of code, and off the back you have user management functionality available. Okay, you have ASP.NET. It's a framework. You have Java frameworks like Java EE. You have Ruby frameworks like Ruby on Rails. You have Python framework. You have ColdFusion Makeup language. These are all web application development frameworks. Okay. Now, what is a web application? This is a little complicated sometimes, depending on who you talk to and what you mean. For me, it's simply any application software that runs in a web browser or is created in a web-supported programming language, such as JavaScript, HTML, CSS. And it also relies on a common web browser to render the application. Anything of such, I consider it a web application. So in other words, any dynamic website today, you can consider it a web application. Anything that's dynamic on the web, it's using JavaScript, it's using HTML, it's using CSS, you can consider it a web application. It depends on the browser. You don't have to start a special application. You don't have to install an exe file, or you don't have to install anything. You just go to the browser, you access it, but while you are accessing it in the browser, you can do things that you usually do in your regular software applications. This is a web application. As long as you have to go through the web, it has some amount of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it's a web application. Okay, so framework architectural patterns, we're going to talk about one main one which is very popular, that's MVC, the Model View Controller. So many frameworks today for the web follow MVC architectural pattern to separate the data model with the business rules from the user interface. So 3 main things here: data model, business rules, and user interface. So you have model view controller. The model is simply the data. This is where you write your SQL statements to insert, to delete, to update. The business rules, this is your controller. This is where you put your PHP code or your ASP or your C# code to do your if, your loops, your this and that, and all that goes into your controller. And your user interface, it's simply your theming or template layer. This is where your HTML, your CSS, your JavaScript, all of that goes into the user interface. So this separation of coding, you put all your data related code in one file or a couple of files in the specific folder, all your logic in a couple of files in a specific folder, and all your theme in a specific folder in a couple of files. That 3-tier separation is simply what the MVC is all about. And this is used today in almost all web applications. Okay, so this is generally considered a good practice as it is a modularized code. So you can use modules. That's why if you use most of the open source CMSs like Joomla, WordPress, or Drupal, they are all based on modules. It's just that they call them differently. It's because all of them use some amount of model view control pattern. So in WordPress, you have plugins and themes. In Drupal, you have themes and modules. In Joomla, for example, you have components, plugins, and modules. So in Joomla, plugins are the smallest amount of, that's the smallest bit of software that you can write to extend Joomla. A module could be some software that has a couple of plugins, will be a module. And a component will be something that have a module, they have a couple of modules and a couple of plugins all put together to build some kind of functionality. That's how Joomla, for example, does it. In Drupal, it's all called a module. In that module, you can do simple programs, you can do complicated programs, and you can do pretty much anything that you want. You can interact with the theming layer in the modules. From modules, you can interact with anything in the system from the module. So it's just one name, and it's called module. In WordPress, it's just simply, again, plugins, but those plugins are the same like the modules and components you have in Drupal and like you have in Joomla. They all follow the same pattern, okay? So MVC is something you need to know as if you take a web development class, and it's pretty much code separation. Separates your code, your data, separates your logic, and separates your user interface completely in the web applications. And this permits different views to be presented, such as web pages for humans and web service interfaces for remote applications. This makes all of it possible. You have certain pages in your website, humans don't see them, humans don't use them, other machines use them. For example, in every open source software project or any project, web application project today that is search engine optimized or search engine aware, it will have a robot file. This robot file is read by search engines, by machines, to direct them on what pages of the site they are allowed to search and optimize. If you don't have a robot file, the web search engines or other machines trying to crawl your site will not know where the restrictions are. What pages should they touch and which ones they should not touch. In Drupal, for example, your admin pages, you don't want Google to crawl your admin pages. Because if they crawl your admin pages, they will provide information to the public that you probably don't want to be available to the public. So in the robot file, admin pages are usually X'd out. So when Google search engine goes in and they read the robot file that you, the human, don't see and don't read, they can tell that admin pages, I don't need to crawl them, I should skip them. I should only check these other pages. So MVC makes all of this type of interfaces, presenting this type of interfaces possible to humans and to machines. And like you know about RSS feeds, Real Syndicate, you go to a website, it tells you click here to get latest updates, those RSS feeds are machine readable also. Okay, so the one I'm not going to talk about here much is PAC. That's a presentation abstraction control. It's another type of architectural pattern for the web, but it's not it's not used as much as MVC. I just had to mention it so that you know about it. Some people sometimes consider Drupal to be PAC based. There is always that confusion. Is Drupal using PAC or is it using MVC? I'll say it's in between, because Drupal by itself is a framework and it's a design pattern by itself to some extent. Okay, so for frameworks, we'll stop here again and we'll move on to the next one.